Have you ever noticed that some of the most intelligent women you know are also some of the most overwhelmed? Not because they lack ideas, not because they lack insight, not because they lack potential. In fact, many of these women seem to possess an extraordinary ability to perceive things that others miss. They notice patterns before they become obvious. They intuit connections between subjects that appear completely unrelated. They often sense where a situation is heading long before anyone else in the room. Their minds are rich, creative, imaginative, and deeply alive. Yet despite all of this, many struggle with something surprisingly simple: turning what they know into a life that consistently reflects it. This creates a painful contradiction. Internally, they can see enormous possibility. They know what they want to create. They know what would improve their lives. They know what needs to change. And yet somehow, the bridge between insight and action often feels unstable. Ideas arrive quickly, but implementation feels slow. Inspiration flows naturally, but structure feels exhausting. Over time, many begin to blame themselves. They conclude that they are undisciplined, inconsistent, scattered, or incapable of following through. But what if that is not actually the most accurate way to understand what is happening? One of the reasons I have always been drawn to Kabbalah is that it offers language for inner experiences that are often difficult to describe. It does not replace psychology, neuroscience, or practical understanding. Instead, it provides a symbolic map of the forces operating within human consciousness. And when we look at the tree of life through the lens of neurodivergence, one particular relationship becomes incredibly interesting: the relationship between Chochmah and Binah, between inspiration and structure, between vision and form, between possibility and manifestation. Many ADHD women seem to spend their lives moving back and forth between these two forces. They are not fully living in one or the other. Instead, they often find themselves caught in the tension between them. Part of them is naturally drawn toward inspiration, exploration, and possibility. Another part knows they need structure, consistency, and containment. The result can feel like living between two worlds that never quite meet. To understand this dynamic, we first need to understand what Chochmah actually represents. Chochmah is often translated as wisdom, but that translation can be misleading. When most people hear the word wisdom, they think of accumulated knowledge, experience, or expertise. Chochmah is something different. It is the spark before the thought, the flash before the explanation. It is the moment when an idea suddenly appears in awareness without any obvious sequence of steps leading to it. You may have experienced this while taking a walk, driving, showering, or lying awake at night. Suddenly, an answer arrives. A solution emerges. A connection becomes obvious. It feels less like thinking and more like receiving. There is a sudden sense of knowing that appears fully formed. This is the energy of Chochmah. It is fast, expansive, intuitive, and creative. It moves beyond logic before logic has a chance to catch up. Many ADHD women immediately recognize this experience because they live there frequently. Their minds naturally move through patterns and associations. They often jump from one concept to another without consciously traveling through the intermediate steps. While others are still analyzing a problem, they have already sensed the answer. They can often see the big picture before they can explain how they arrived there. This ability can be incredibly powerful. It allows for creativity, innovation, intuition, and deep pattern recognition. But Chochmah has a shadow side. A flash of insight is not the same thing as a completed reality. An idea is not the same thing as a structure. A A possibility is not the same thing as a manifestation. Every spark eventually requires a vessel. Every vision eventually requires form. Every moment of inspiration eventually asks a practical question. What happens next? This is where Binah enters the picture. If Chochmah is the seed, Binah is the womb. If Chochmah is inspiration, Binah is development. If Chochmah is possibility, Binah is form. Binah takes the raw spark and begins shaping it into something that can exist in the world. It slows things down. It asks questions. How will this work? What are the steps? What comes first? What comes next? What structure is needed to support this vision? Unlike Chochmah, which arrives suddenly, Binah unfolds gradually. It is patient. It is methodical. It is willing to stay with something long enough for it to mature. It takes inspiration and transforms it into reality. Without Binah, ideas remain ideas. Dreams remain dreams. Potential remains potential. This is where many ADHD women experience their greatest frustration. The issue is usually not a lack of ideas. The issue is often an overwhelming abundance of ideas combined with limited capacity for organizing, sequencing, and containing them. Their minds continue generating possibilities faster than their structures can hold them. New projects appear before old projects are completed. New interests emerge before previous interests have fully matured. New visions arrive before existing visions have taken form. The result is often overwhelm. Many people assume overwhelm comes from having too much to do, but that is only part of the story. Very often, overwhelm comes from carrying more possibilities than your current structure can hold. Every idea creates a potential commitment. Every opportunity creates another direction to explore. Every vision creates future responsibilities. Eventually, the nervous system becomes responsible for managing hundreds of open loops simultaneously. This is why so many intelligent and creative women feel exhausted despite not necessarily doing more than everyone else. They are not only managing tasks, they are managing possibilities. They are carrying unfinished books, unfinished businesses, unfinished projects, unfinished courses, unfinished plans, unfinished dreams, and unfinished versions of themselves all at the same time. From a Kabbalistic perspective, we could say that there is more Chochmah than Binah, more expansion than containment, more vision than structure, more possibility than form. The tragedy is that many women interpret this as a personal failure. They start believing they lack discipline. They compare themselves to people who appear naturally organized. They wonder why consistency seems effortless for others and exhausting for them. Over time, this can slowly erode self-trust. After enough unfinished projects and abandoned plans, they begin questioning their own abilities. But perhaps the problem is not a lack of intelligence. Perhaps the problem is not a lack of motivation. Perhaps the problem is not even a lack of discipline. Perhaps the real issue is that inspiration has exceeded containment. Imagine pouring 10 liters of water into a 1-liter vessel. The problem is not the water. The problem is the size of the container. In many cases, ADHD women are not suffering because they have too little creativity. They are suffering because they have more creativity than their current structures can support. This realization changes everything because it shifts the focus away from self-criticism and toward balance. The goal is no longer to suppress inspiration. The goal is not to become someone else. The goal is not to force yourself into systems that were designed for a completely different nervous system. Instead, the goal becomes strengthening the containers that allow your gifts to take form. One of the deepest teachings hidden within Kabbalah is the idea that creation requires limitation. This sounds counterintuitive because modern culture often associates freedom with having no limits. But if you look closely, every act of creation depends on boundaries. A river flows because it has banks. Music exists because notes are separated by structure. Language exists because sounds are organized into meaningful patterns. Even life itself depends on containers. Without form, there is only potential. This is why Binah should never be understood as the enemy of creativity. Binah is what allows creativity to survive. It is what protects inspiration long enough for it to become real. Without structure, inspiration disperses. Without containment, possibility evaporates. Without form, even the most brilliant ideas remain trapped in the realm of potential. Many ADHD women spend years trying to become less intuitive, less imaginative, less expansive, and less creative. They believe that these qualities are causing their problems. But perhaps the opposite is true. Perhaps these qualities are actually their greatest gifts. Perhaps the real challenge is learning how to build structures worthy of holding them. This changes the role of structure entirely. Structure is no longer punishment. Structure becomes support. Structure becomes protection. Structure becomes the vessel through which intuition can finally express itself in the physical world. When viewed through this lens, the relationship between Chochmah and Binah becomes deeply beautiful. Neither force is superior to the other. Chochmah without Binah becomes chaos. Binah without Chochmah becomes rigidity. One creates endless possibilities without manifestation. The other creates endless structure without life. The magic happens when the two begin working together. And perhaps this is why so many neurodivergent women feel perpetually divided. Part of them longs for freedom. Part of them longs for stability. Part of them craves exploration. Part of them craves clarity. Part of them wants infinite possibility. Part of them desperately wants peace. Maybe neither side is wrong. Maybe both sides are necessary. Maybe the deepest work is not choosing between intuition and structure. Maybe the deepest work is learning how they belong together. Because your intuition is not the problem. Your sensitivity is not the problem. Your imagination is not the problem. Your ability to see patterns is not the problem. These qualities may be among your greatest gifts. The invitation is simply to create containers capable of holding them. When Chochmah and Binah begin working together, something remarkable happens. Ideas stop remaining ideas. Visions stop remaining visions. Possibilities begin becoming realities. The gap between who you know you could be and the life you are actually living slowly begins to close. And perhaps that gap was never evidence that something was wrong with you. Perhaps it was simply an invitation to understand the sacred relationship between intuition and structure, an invitation to understand Chochmah and Binah, and an invitation to discover that your greatest challenge may also contain one of your greatest gifts. If this resonated with you, let me know in the comments. Do you feel that your life is currently leaning more toward Chochmah or more toward Binah? And if you'd like to explore Kabbalah, archetypes, nervous system regulation, and the deeper structures that shape our lives, subscribe and join us here at Sacred Structure. New videos every Sunday.